Gary Grant Jr. was only 7 years old when he was found in an abandoned lot in New Jersey, bludgeoned to death. He disappeared on January 12, 1984. He was found on January 14th. To this day, his family is still seeking justice. Hey, everybody, and welcome to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. This is Katie Weaver. I'm here with my sister, co host, and partner in crime, Christy Brower. Hello.
Hello. Hey, everybody.
How's it going?
It is going quite well. It is a bright and sunny Friday
Yes,
that
it
we are
is.
recording this.
Right.
So I don't know. I've been having fun. I've been searching Florida man crimes this morning, and that's always a good time.
Yeah. So this is actually our Monday episode, but yeah, we're
It
recording on
is.
Friday due to my ridiculous schedule recently. But
I mean, I didn't want to say anything, but
oh, I know. I get it. The dogs are saying the same thing. So are the pigs. Seriously, woman. Land. But but softball, I mean, it will literally be done in a month. It just
yeah,
goes so fast. So,
it does.
we're just going to keep on trucking. I have been witnessing quite the turf war this morning in my
Ah.
front yard between magpies, squirrels, and crows over the crow feeder.
Oh, that's fun.
It's been pretty interesting. Yesterday, I saw this start with the squirrels and the crows. And then today, two magpies were in the mix, and there was like a standoff going on in the front yard between all parties. Anyway, that's quite the ordeal. But you start putting all the good stuff like whole, in the shell peanuts and cat food in the feeder, and well, everybody wants their piece of the pie. So,
It's true. It's true.
speaking of pie, they'd probably like that too. I don't know.
I mean, the magpies. It's in the
This
name.
is true. Yeah. Anyway, I'm loving every second of it. I think next week I'm going to try to put my GoPro out there and do a time lapse video of the whole morning so that we can speed it up and really see everybody who's coming in and what they're doing. And yeah,
I love
we,
that.
we may get something awesome. So good stuff.
Mhm.
Well, we do have a packed episode for you guys today. The main case is a listener request, and it's a
Mhm.
cold read. And we haven't done a cold read in quite a while. We
Mm-mm.
only do cold reads on old cold cases because
Yeah.
ethically that's where we stand. You'll see other psychics do things other ways. That's their business, but this is how we do it.
Yep.
But this case, this happened in the 80s. This is absolutely fair game for a cold read. So, Christy, I'm excited to present it to you. But before I do, I'm going to kick the mic over to you for our first segment today, which happens to be Florida Man.
Oh boy, doesn't it though? Oh, Florida. Have you ever been in the hospital and had trouble getting your nurse's attention?
Yeah, yes.
Mm.
I'll say yes.
I mean, generally, what do you do to get help?
Well, you push the button, like, and you wait. Maybe you push it again if you have to. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, John King was in a Florida hospital and he was getting a little impatient with his nurse. So he
Mm.
decided the best thing to do would be to set his bed on fire because she would definitely come then. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So he had a roommate who watched him light a plastic bag on fire.
a plastic
And
bag?
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
Uh-huh.
What could
Plastic
possibly
bag.
go wrong?
So the roommate convinced him to put it out and went back to his bed and then he did it again. So the roommate let the hospital staff know that this guy's bed was on fire.
Mhm.
So the nursing staff, they did come running. I mean, we have to give him that. It did work.
It worked.
Brought people
Not
right to his
advised.
room. They put the fire out very quickly.
Mhm.
It did, though, destroy his hospital bed. Irreparable.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that's kind of a crime. And so, like, the
What?
fire
Arson
people
is not
and the
okay?
police came, and, it turns out that, now he'll just be trying to get his prison guard's attention instead of a nurse. So,
Good luck lighting your bed on fire this time.
right. This is a
Holy
cautionary tale for us
moly.
all.
The poor roommate, my God.
I know, the roommate was seriously pissed off.
Well, yeah. Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
Not
Florida
advised,
never
man.
disappoints, do they?
They really never
Actually,
do they?
both of my segments are from Florida today.
Oh, wow.
So, you know what they say.
Something's in the water. Yep.
Something like that. Well, I'm going to turn the mic back to you for the main case.
Okay. So, our main case today, again, it was a listener request. Not a case I'd heard of before. Christy, I know it's not a case that you have heard of before.
Nope.
This is quite the tale. This is about the disappearance and murder of Gary Lee Grant Jr.
Okay.
It happened in Atlantic City, New Jersey. On January 12th, there was a day where they didn't have any school. There was a teachers' conference in the middle of the week. And so, Gary was set to cruise the neighborhood like any cool kid would.
It was the
And
80s, man. That's what we all did.
right. So he lived with his mom and his two sisters. His dad and mom had been separated for about a year, but his dad also lived right there in the same town, and he was a police officer. He is Gary Sr. Mom's name was May, or is May. And so at breakfast, she asked him what his plans were for the day. And I'm thinking about our neighborhood when we were kids. Even at that age, we were out riding bikes all day, jumping on the trampoline. You know,
Yeah.
that was just what life was like. He
Mm-hmm.
told her that he was going to play with friends and that he had an appointment at 2:30. Well, what 7-year-old has an appointment anywhere? Well, she didn't know, but she figured this had something to do with a little girlfriend or something and just thought it was cute and didn't push any further about, what 2:30 was about.
Mm-hmm.
So, yet again, safe neighborhood where just the kids all played. There wasn't any big concern there.
Mm-hmm.
So he did head out to play with his friends and about noon. And he told her he would be back around 4 or before it got dark. So, this is January. So, it's winter. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
about 4:30, it's dinner time and Gary's not home, which is weird. That's never ever happened before. So she's a little bit concerned because this isn't normal for him. And so uh, she starts looking for his friends and she finds two little girls that he likes to play with. And they said they did play with him earlier, but
Mm-hmm.
he left about 4:30 and said he had to go home. Well, he never came home. So 2 more hours passed. So at 6:30, she finally calls dad. He was supposed to be on shift that night, but he called his sergeant and told him his son's, missing. They need to find him. So they told him, don't come in.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they told him he could not come in. When they started a full scale search, they told him that he was not allowed to be a part of it.
Right.
But of course, what dad, and especially police officer dad, is just going to not be a part of the search for your missing child.
Yeah.
So he had searched by himself until about 2 a.m. By the next morning, the entire Atlantic City Police Department was searching. Everybody was searching. So, of course, Gary is searching on his own. He searched abandoned houses. Being an officer, he knew a lot of the area,
Sure.
and knew where you might look for a kid,
Yeah.
and getting more and more frantic all the while because this is very wrong. Something's very wrong.
Sure.
He searched abandoned houses. Searched under the boardwalk. He searched arcades. He went into a whole bunch of arcades. Remember arcades? That's
Sure
not so
do.
much of a thing anymore, but when we were kids,
We just play games on our phones now.
right? When we were kids, you'd beg your dad for quarters and you'd go to the arcade and play games and win stuffed animals and stuff. And it was a blast. And
Right.
Atlantic City had a lot of arcades. So he searched all of the
Oh, yeah, I'm
arcades.
sure they did.
Yeah, asking everybody if they had seen anything whatsoever. Uh, some of the workers from one of the arcades thought they saw him early in the morning, which made his dad think that he was wandering the streets somewhere. But still, they searched that entire day. Nothing. They searched the alleys, the trash cans, the dumpsters, everything. And they're just getting more and more concerned that something has happened to this little boy. Something is really, really wrong. He's never not come home,
Right.
and, this is the son of a police officer. So the entire department is just combing the city, trying to figure out what the hell happened.
Yeah.
Well, by now the public is hearing about this, and they're also really concerned. And there is a guy named Robert Huey who owned a warehouse. He had a vacant warehouse that, he wondered. So he went and searched the warehouse top to bottom and walked around the property. And at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, so he went missing sometime after 4:30 on Thursday, the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 3:30 on Saturday, this guy, Robert Huey, found a gold carpet, remember the old gold, carpet? Well, he
Yeah,
found
like
an old
shag,
gold
little shag
rug
carpet.
thing, yeah,
Mhm.
on the property, and he flipped it over, and it had a child
Oh.
wrapped up in it, rolled up in it, and it was Gary. And Gary had been bludgeoned to death. And so, of course, he called the police. There was a length of heavy pipe near it that they think was the murder weapon, or at least partly. So the police imposed a radio silence because, of course, Gary's dad is going to hear what's coming across the radio. So
Mhm.
they impose a radio silence so that they can go to their house, get their family together, and tell them what happened. And dad actually happens on the scene before they can even get to the family.
Oh, no.
And they tell him, it's Gary Jr. And he had kind of a breakdown and was trying to see his son, and they wouldn't
Yeah.
let him. They restrained him and wouldn't allow him to see the evidence or to see the body, which I can only imagine how emotional this was and how angry he must have been,
Yeah.
at everyone and everything. Like, what a horrifying situation for him to be in. But so now they have found the guy, or our little guy, right? So then, of course, they start tracking his final hours. They start talking to people that knew him. So one kid says that they saw him Thursday afternoon near the junior high with a kid named Carl Boo Mason. This kid went by Boo. Boo was 12, but he was developmentally disabled and usually played with kids that were quite a bit younger than him.
Mhm.
So he was 5 years older than Gary, but he and Gary actually hung out quite a bit.
Mhm.
He was actually smaller. Even though he was 5 years older, he was smaller in weight and height than Gary.
Oh, wow.
He was, this little guy that had some pretty serious disabilities, it sounds like.
Mhm.
So his mom didn't like Boo. She didn't like that he was that much older, and she didn't really like Gary to play with him, but they did hang out every once in a while.
Mhm.
So when detectives interviewed Boo, he couldn't get his story straight. He's 12. He's
Mhm.
developmentally delayed.
Right.
They take him to the station with his grandmother, and they put grandma in one room, and they take Boo into another room,
Oh, dear.
and they start interrogating the hell out of him. Well, Boo, for the longest time, swears that he rode bikes with Gary on Wednesday, but he didn't see him on Thursday. But other kids said that they did see him with him on Thursday. So they pushed and they pushed and they pushed him, and his story changed multiple times, and he didn't know what to do or say. And they basically really inappropriately interrogated and illegally interrogated him until
Hmm.
he admitted to strangling Gary, which Gary had been strangled, but that hadn't been released yet in the autopsy. Nobody would have known that. Like the public wouldn't have known that. So they took that as their smoking gun. Boo did it. He had to have done it. And it's horrifying. This was when he finally admitted his guilt. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So they
No.
had been, emotionally battering this child all night. Well, then they charged him. And he
Mm.
was crying and begging to go home with grandma and saying that he didn't do it. But the officer told him if he admitted to doing it, he could go home. And no.
Asshole.
Hmm. So he and his grandma sign it because they don't know what they're supposed to do. So he gets charged and he gets put in a juvenile detention center.
Oh,
Well, in the meantime, they give him a polygraph. The results are inconclusive. 3 days later, they give him another polygraph, which a 12-year-old taking a
right.
polygraph and
Well, and a 12-year-old disabled child, I don't even think that a polygraph could be accurate for a kid
it
with a
couldn't,
disability like that.
and it really wasn't. The only thing that was accurate about the polygraph is that every time they gave him one, uh, it determined that he was telling the truth when he said he didn't kill Gary.
Yeah.
What wasn't clear with the polygraph is whether he had actually been at the scene. So there were some weird things. They found droplets of blood on Boo's clothes, but they were so small they weren't able to type them. There wasn't DNA back then anyway. Um, but there was the weirdness about him knowing that he was strangled.
Or guessing,
Well,
or had it fed to him. I mean,
well, here's the
because
problem.
did he say anything about being bludgeoned to death?
No, but Boo had an older brother that was a neighborhood criminal that was known in the neighborhood. And he had been in trouble before for putting kids up to committing crimes on his behalf, like hoisting them through windows to steal things from neighbors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the working beliefs that Gary Sr. has had is that Boo's brother may have tried to put Gary up to committing a crime, and he may have refused to and said, "My dad's a cop and I'm going to tell on you." And that maybe he killed him, and that maybe Boo saw that and just was too scared or too turned around and confused and traumatized to really know what was true or know what to say. But that was a working theory for quite a while that perhaps he actually did see or know something of the murder. It just, he didn't do it. So, a month after he was arrested, there was a hearing to determine whether the confession was admissible in court, which, of course, it wasn't. And the judge determined it wasn't. In fact, the judge told the police that they had trampled over this little boy's rights by interrogating him alone and by interrogating him for many hours and through the night, and basically said, "This is utter bullshit. This is unconstitutional. We're dismissing these charges. You have nothing."
Yeah.
So he got to go back home. Well, they didn't have any other suspects. And, because they were wasting their time with a disabled 12-year-old instead of
Right.
finding the real killer.
Right.
And of course, Gary Sr. has been banned from working on this and is just kind of doing it on his own time. But I really got the sense that no, they didn't want to hear his opinion. You just shut up and stay out of it kind of thing. And he never did. He always, continued to work on it, and he still does.
Sure.
So 2 years go by, And nothing, nothing. Well, on January 4th, 1986, someone vandalized an Atlantic City patrol car. And they wrote on it, Gary Grant's dead. I am living. Another will die on the 12th if all goes right. That would have been the anniversary of Gary's murder.
Mm-hmm.
So they let Gary Sr. analyze it too. And what they decide is that it had to have been written by an adult, but they never did figure out who wrote it. So then, a few weeks later, in the same neighborhood, written on the sidewalk, Gary Grant Jr. lives. I still killed him. Son of a pig officer. Payback is an MF.
Mm.
So then they kind of start going, is it possible? And they had wondered before, is it possible that Gary was murdered in retaliation to his dad being a police officer and making an arrest? They couldn't come up with a single suspect that they thought could have or would have done that. They just did not know. But somebody then was taunting them. And again, my God, this poor dad has been through a lot.
Sure has.
So then, nothing. And his dad is still working on this case, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in 2015, he's listening to old files of 911 calls. And he comes across a call that he'd never heard of before, actually, two of them. The first one happened on March 8th, 1986. And that one I'm going to play for you guys. And it's a little bit quiet. You might have to turn it up, but I felt like this was well worth listening to. So let's do that.
Police and fire.
Yes. Is it possible for me to collect the reward on my own self for the murder of Gary Grant?
Is it for you to collect a reward on for yourself? If you have information, what are you saying? That, I don't know what you mean. Like, you know who did it or something like that, you mean?
No, well, how's if I did it myself and I want to collect the own reward?
If you did it?
Yeah.
Well, suppose I hook you into the Detective Bureau.
No, it's okay.
I mean, that's on the...
Make sure they know that's not a crank call. You never be able to catch them.
You know what?
You never be able to catch them.
You know what? Take your time.
Yeah. Wants to see if he can rat his own self out and collect the reward money. Yeah.
I mean, to use it for your defense? I mean, for what purpose?
Right? This is my thought. Of course, he refuses to give his name, and he says
911 to ask that question.
Yeah. Of course, he says, you're never going to catch me. He wouldn't give his name, whatever. He says this is not a crank call, but somehow Gary Sr. was never told about that phone call. He found it himself in 2015.
What the hell?
Well, there was a second call that I don't have footage of. Pardon me. Also in 1986, about 2 months later. This caller also refuses to give his name, but he says he knows who killed Gary. He says somebody confessed to him. He says the killer had committed the crime because he was mad at Gary Sr. Gary Sr. does remember this person, but doesn't recall ever having any issues with him. However, the person that the anonymous caller named had been arrested in 2011 for sexual misconduct with a child.
Oh, wow.
But they have never charged him in this case because they literally had no evidence that tied him to it. So that's the whole case. His dad, from what I can gather, is no longer an officer with Atlantic City. He was for a really long time. It looks like he has moved to Puerto Rico now. But I'm sure is still working this case from every angle he can come up with. He did start a Facebook page for Gary as well several years ago. You guys can go find that on Facebook if you want to. It's a private group. It just absolutely devastated their family and their community. I found an interesting article from, let's see, It was on the 35th anniversary of the initial crime, so it was in 2019. And the detective that is working it, or the prosecutor, the Atlantic County prosecutor, Damon Tyner, was 13 when Gary disappeared and died. They went to the same grade school, Our Lady of the Star, or Our Lady the Star of the Sea Elementary. Thought that was so sweet. Um, Gary was the manager for the basketball team that Tyner played on, and it was
Wow.
coached by Gary Grant Sr. So he's known their family since he was a little boy.
Wow.
He said, I remember Gary Jr. not being at my basketball practices anymore because he was missing. I remember it like it was yesterday. It heightened fear at a time at school because a kid was missing and that kind of thing just didn't happen. And then, of course, missing and then murdered. But, he is now the prosecutor there in Atlantic City and he still wants to work this case. They just don't have much in evidence to work from. But it is still an open case.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, with all of that being said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get out of your way and just ask you to offer your impressions. Read this case for us. What do you think?
Okay. So, my initial impression is that this was a stranger kidnapping. It was not the older brother. It was not anybody that knew him. All of the familiarity with dad being a cop and all that stuff, that came after, because in being kidnapped, Gary told him, my dad is a police officer. You should let me go. You're going to be in big trouble. And that's where that came from. But it wasn't retaliation and it wasn't someone familiar to him. This was an opportunity. As you know, unfortunately, that happened a lot in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like it was an adult. I do feel like you didn't say whether he'd been sexually assaulted or not, but I do think there was a sexual motivation behind it. I do feel like he was killed very quickly after he was taken. And I don't feel that the little boy that got initially charged with this had anything to do with his death. He didn't know anything. The I strangled him was a guess based on the police are scaring the living shit out of him, and he was trying to tell them something that would appease them so they would let him go. I don't feel like any of that was connected, that this was an opportunistic pedophile stranger kidnapping. And this person discovered, because he had accidentally taken the son of a police officer, that he had this opportunity at some notoriety. And that's where the phone calls came from and the stuff on the sidewalk and the taunting came from. I do feel like the person that was accused, that the caller accused, is somebody that they knew was also a pedophile, but they didn't do it. It was the caller who called and said, can I turn myself in for it? That was really the guy. That was really the guy. He was in his early 20s, very troubled in his community. And had they looked a little further into, I feel like he'd been in trouble before for touching people inappropriately, peeping, that kind of thing. I just feel like they wasted so much time focusing on Gary's friend that they never really looked at any other options. But
Do you think he lived in the neighborhood?
He lived in the area. I don't think he lived in the neighborhood, but I do think that he was trolling, looking for a kid on their own, looking for someone easy to grab. This is one of those grab a kid and throw him in a van kind of situations.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think it'll ever be solved?
No, I don't. I don't, unfortunately, because it happened really fast. Nobody saw it happen. There is no connection to Gary or his family or his friends. I don't feel it will ever be solved. Do I feel like this person has offended again? Yes. I actually feel like they are in prison.
Okay.
That they have been caught for something else, but they will not be caught for this case.
Yeah.
They have dark hair. They're white, dark hair. I think he was 21-ish when this happened. And his name is either it's a Joe or a John, like a J-O name, first name. I don't really I'm not getting a last name on him. But I do feel like he was eventually arrested for assaulting another child and that he's in prison.
I suspect that the evidence wasn't preserved in a way that DNA is possible.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I haven't read that, but that's my suspicion, because that could have been done by now easily.
Yeah, and if that prosecutor's working on it, that's the first thing they would do is look at what evidence do we have that could be tested now. I don't feel like they will have it, and I'm not sure. There was a sexual component, but I don't know. I wouldn't say that it was a traditional sexual assault. Let me just put it that way.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. What a sad case.
Yeah.
A really sad case. He's so darling and sweet and clearly so beloved by his family and his community, and one of those things that rocks communities and they never really quite recover from,
Yeah. Well, it's just so unfortunate that the police had such a knee-jerk reaction to that little kid.
Yeah.
It was such a huge mistake. The thing that I don't understand is how did they think he transported Gary's body?
Right.
And
How
where
did they
did he
also
get the
think?
carpet,
Yeah.
How did he carry him? Like,
Honestly, how
physically
did they
couldn't have
even
done it.
think he was strong enough to overpower Gary and strangle him to death?
He wasn't.
He
He
wasn't.
also wasn't an organized enough thinker to then conceal his crime. And this, this was a more mature, more organized thought person to be able to have, taken his
My
body to where he
feeling on
was
that,
and hidden it and, done
yeah.
the things that he did.
My feeling on it is that Boo came from a rough family, and it just seemed so easy to decide he was just no good too,
Yeah, easy.
Yeah.
That's the problem, I think, with a lot of these cases that go cold like this is that there's a suspect that seems easy at the beginning. It doesn't mean that they did it.
Yeah.
And certainly a disabled child, what resources did he have to conceal that body? He had none.
Right.
Let alone being able to physically overpower him or physically carry him after he was dead. No.
Well, thank God the judge was willing to preserve his actual constitutional rights.
Right. Yeah.
Or this could be a case that we've seen these before. It could have been a case where he sat in prison for 20 years until somebody, the Innocence Project or something jumped on it and finally got some justice.
We have a case like that here in Idaho Falls. Angie Dodge's murder that we've talked about many times that happened to Christopher Tapp, and he spent 20 years in prison for a crime he did not commit.
And he too was told, if you'll just confess, we'll let you go home.
Yes, he was.
After being interrogated. His was for more like 2 straight days. They didn't let him sleep for 2 days. But for a child at 3 o'clock in the morning, when you've been going at him for many hours.
And alone.
Terrible.
What in the hell made them think that they could interrogate a 12-year-old kid without a guardian with him?
They were
That
very
is
gung-ho.
totally illegal.
Yeah. They were very gung-ho, though. They were just determined they were going to just put a nail in this. They were going to solve it. And a police officer's son, they were not going to stand for this, but terribly mishandled.
Yeah. Just ridiculous.
Yep. And all the love to Gary's family, particularly his dad, who has worked tirelessly for the last 40 years trying to figure out what happened to his son.
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. Wow.
Yep. All righty. Well, Christy, I'm actually, I've really got you in the hot seat today. I'm going to kick the mic back to you for a DNA for the win case.
You bet. Sometimes DNA finally brings justice.
Yes.
And in the case of the killer clown, which of course this happened in Florida in the 90s, DNA has finally brought forward some justice.
And it had to be
So
a clown, didn't it? Just had
it
to be a
did, right?
clown.
Had to be a clown.
Mm-hmm.
Marlene Warren answered her front door to a clown. A clown who shot and killed her.
Oh, no.
It was that quick.
Oh,
Police had nothing. This case was cold for 30 years.
oh my God.
And then in 2017, they were able to retest some DNA that,
Mhm.
of course, they had, been sitting on, because this is just going to keep on happening.
Oh, yeah.
And they discovered that Sheila Keene Warren was the killer clown. And at the time of the murder, she was having an affair with Marlene's husband, Michael Warren.
Oh my God. Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
And Sheila and Michael got married. After the case went cold, they waited a while because,
yeah.
as you do, I guess.
Oh, well, unless you're Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, but I digress.
Yes. So they got married. 30 years later, some DNA testing proves that, in fact, Sheila was the murderer and killed Michael's wife. Michael, who then went on to marry this killer clown.
Holy shit.
But
Did
in
Michael
27
know?
I believe so.
Wow.
So in 2017, they proved that it was, in fact, Sheila who did this murder 30 years ago. So DNA for the win.
And so she's living? She's been arrested?
I believe so, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's nice to hear some DNA for the win that the perp is actually still on the planet and gets to,
right. That's what
pay
so
the
many of
piper.
these now, the perpetrator's dead.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, can you imagine the gall to show up to your boyfriend's wife's house dressed as a clown and shoot her and just walk away?
Yep.
And then marry him. That's
just take over her life.
That's some guts is what that is. Yeah. So
that is so sick. Wow.
It is. It's horrifying.
Wow. Good on the DNA piece then.
Mm-hmm. But she got 30 years before they caught her,
Yep. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine how her family must feel?
No.
Because eventually the people that knew them probably eventually embraced her, and she became a part of their family, not realizing that she had stolen someone else's life.
Yeah. Literally.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Wow. Ugh. Wow. Throw the whole book at her.
Keep on processing that DNA. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Let's keep getting this accountability. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, that's it for Monday. So we'll be back Tuesday and Wednesday with regular episodes. We'll be back Wednesday night for case updates. We'll be back Thursday night for the Psychic Hour. This week it is Marching Orders. It's the first show of the month. So we have lots yet to come this week. We do have 2 new Patreons that went up last week. So if you are a patron, make sure you go check them out. They are both just really good cases. A lot of really interesting stuff. Especially if you're interested in cults. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What the hell? What's with the cults thing? Yeah, we did that one super secret case. We can't even tell you what it's about because it's a local case and we don't want to have problems. But check it out. Go find us on Patreon. We're just True Crime Paranormal over there, and you will find, I don't know, what are there now? Probably 40 episodes or something.
Oh, more, because we've been doing 2 a month for almost 2 years. Yeah. Crazy. It's good. We love it. All righty. Well, like, share, comment, dislike, whatever. But any engagement you guys give our our I want to say product, and that's not right. Any engagement you guys give our episodes helps us a lot. We appreciate you. Have a good Monday. Take good care of yourselves. Do something nice for yourself today. You sure do deserve it. This has been yet another production of True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.